I started doing these channel updates a few months back, and I find that they're a useful way for me to review what I've gotten accomplished over the last month, compare it to what I intended to accomplish, and to think about what I'm going to be doing over the coming month, sketch out some projects, set some goals. It also helps my viewers have some idea of what it is that I'm up to, in part because some of the things I'm involved with are not happening on YouTube. You can see some reflections of them on YouTube, but many of them are happening out in the much wider world, not necessarily on the net. I will be including some links in the description of this video to some of the things that I'm talking about if they've got useful linked material for you. So what happened in October? I didn't get as much accomplished as I'd hoped, but that seems to be the running pattern for most months. I went to the Society for Ancient Greek Philosophy, where I presented my paper on anger, justice, and injustice in Aristotle, and it was well received. I didn't actually read the entire paper. I summarized it, and I have a podcast available of it, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on, because I have an idea of what I might do with it this month. If you're interested in it, you can find the handouts, the podcast linked to here, and that's enough to say about that. I also did an Insight radio spot for Patrick McCarty's show. This is something new. I've done a few internet radio shows before with Theology Matters. Now this is a new venue. And Patrick McCarty works out of Chicago, where he's been a freelancer, a professor, doing a lot of different things for a number of years. But he's got this very interesting show where he gets some really interesting topics and guests, and so I was very happy to be on his show. He asked me to talk about Hegel's master-slave dialectic, and that's where we started. And very quickly it spread into a lot of other discussions and ended up focusing towards the end of the show very much on the current state of American and even Western education and the role that technology plays, for good or for bad, often for both at the same time, in American education and the generational differences. You know, we talk about digital natives and the way in which the web is reworking our habits, our ways of approaching material and thinking things through. So that was a very interesting conversation. I'm continuing teaching my courses at Marist College. I've got two classes. One is an Intro to Philosophy class, which is focused specifically on the question of love, friendship, and desire. And so that's been proceeding as it should. You know, students are learning, we're discussing things in class. I'm not getting as much discussion out of them as I'd like, but that's fairly par for the course for Marist students. They're not the most talkative bunch. They are writing good papers, so that's good. My ethics class is continuing on its normal path, where we plowed through utilitarian moral theory and went into deontological moral theories, focusing on Epictetus, W.D. Ross, and then a lot of time on Kant. And we're now moving into the ethics of care before we finish up by going back to virtue ethics with Aristotle, and then a little bit of Thomas Aquinas and a little bit of Alistair McIntyre at the end of the semester. So that's a good place to segue into videos. As usual, I've been recording videos in some of my courses, specifically the Intro to Philosophy, because that's all new material. So I've got some videos this month that I've recorded. We finished up with Aristotle, but I had some things from Nico McCain Ethics Book 10, which I hadn't covered before. Looked at Epicurus, and I hadn't taught the Vatican sayings of Epicurus before. I taught other texts of his, and so we incorporated those, and we talked specifically about the nature of friendship and how it fit into the good life. Then we spent two class sessions on Cicero's On Friendship, a classic text, not only in ancient philosophy, but one that had incredible influence on medieval philosophy and medieval theology. So we looked at that. That's a really fun text to teach. And then we actually tackled, and we only spent 3 class sessions on this, even though it deserves, a whole semester, Augustine's Confessions. And that we just finished up with by the end of the month. So there's course videos on those that you can find. I also managed to shoot some core concept videos in my ethics class. I used my class where I've got videos on that particular material to focus in on particular issues, particular topics, particular concepts. And so I've got some on Bentham, and I also shot a few on Mill, and I shot some on W.D. Ross. I didn't get much done on the existentialism course front, unfortunately. I only managed to get one video on Lev Shestov shot, so that's a bit of a disappointment because I wanted to be further along with that work. But, it's a good video. I really enjoyed researching it and shooting it and editing it and putting it together. It's a little bit longer than my usual 1-hour videos. It's about 1 hour and 20 minutes. And it talks about Shestov's approach to particular philosophical movements and issues. I have been blogging, not as much as I would have liked to this month, and hopefully that'll improve this coming month. I made a decision, or at least came to a decision, about my main blog, which I've had for a number of years, called Orexis de Noetique. And that blog, I've usually been just writing pieces for it, which are fairly long. Sometimes they're in serial form, part 1, part 2, part 3. The longest I ever did with that was a piece on Anselm, which went 7 parts. And I decided what I needed to do with it, because I've got 4 different blogs, and I'm actually incomprehensibly still thinking about using another one whose domain I reserved a while back. I thought I needed to consolidate things. I considered actually closing some of the other blogs like Virtue Ethics Digest and Sadler's Existentialist Updates, and the new one that I started, Heavy Metal Philosopher. But I didn't do that. Instead, what I decided to do is, if I write something on those blogs, and I'm trying to maybe write 2 entries per month on those blogs, I put a link to it and a short little summary of it on my main blog, because that way people, if they're only interested in following one of those blogs, they can follow the Orexis de Noetique blog, and they can stay on top of what I'm doing. And I've been doing this for a while as well, which is putting short blurbs or links or connections to some of the talks that I'm giving, some of the invited occasions, radio shows, whatever it is that I happen to be doing that has some sort of public philosophical aspect to it. So Orexis de Noetique, the entries are in some ways getting shorter, but they're getting more frequent, which is really the way it ought to be for blogs. And I'm going to still continue writing these long entries from time to time when I have the time, when I can carve out the time. But I think if you're following that blog, and I invite everybody to follow that blog, you're going to see a lot more entries, 1 to 2 per week, maybe even 3 per week if I get particularly ambitious. I also got quite a bit of writing done, which was gratifying, on Aristotle and Anger, which is the topic of one of the books that I'm currently writing. And that feels very good. I spend a lot of time producing video content and course content, and I spent a lot of time this month, for example, developing handouts, which are also available online in my academia.edu profile. I should have mentioned that before. So I spent a lot of time doing that stuff, and that takes away time, because there's only so many hours in the day, from some of the stuff that I used to get to do a lot more of, which is to do straight out, hunker down, high theory academic writing. I've got several different book projects going on, and for a while I've been kind of, how would you put it, not so much upset, not depressed, but it's been sort of a drag not getting that much done on them, feeling like I've got these projects that are just sort of hanging out there. So it was nice to actually get some solid work done on my Aristotle and Anger book. Hopefully this coming month I'll get to work on that, and also my Anselm and Moral Theory book. So that's a good point to turn to what's going on in November. Next week I have a talk that I'm giving at Marist College. It was originally going to be scheduled as a lunch talk hosted by the Medieval Renaissance Studies program, but we realized that it's a longer talk, it's more involved, it's not something that lends itself to such a short format, so the Catholic Studies program is actually hosting it at Marist College this coming Tuesday night, 6:30. And what is the talk about? It's about how the 8 capital vices became the 7 deadly sins. A lot of people don't know that the 7 deadly sins have a long history, and that the list that we currently have is not the original list. Not to say that there's anything wrong with the current list, it's just that it has a rich, much more complex history than a lot of people realize. Originally there were 8 capital vices. Envy was not actually one of them. So how did we get from 8 vices to 7 sins? Well, that's a long story, and it involves a lot of different characters, ranging from these monks like Evagrius Ponticus and John Cassian and all these abbots out in the Egyptian and Syrian deserts, Palestinian deserts too, all the way to Thomas Aquinas and Bonaventure, and eventually people like St. John of the Cross. So, and there's other people intervening in the middle, like Gregory the Great. So it's a good talk. I've given it in other forms before, and I'm really looking forward to talking with the Marist students about this, maybe some faculty as well. I'm also going to be doing another Insight Radio. This time it's going to be about Aristotle and Anger. I'm going to be the main guest, and we're going to talk about what I've been researching for, it's been about 6-7 years since I first started researching Aristotle's views on anger, and thinking that I needed to originally write an article about it, and then realized that I had to write a book about it. I'm going to continue blogging, and I've already said enough about that, so I don't think I need to say anything more. Other than, if you want to see the sort of stuff that I'm doing, take a look at Orexis Dianoetike. I'm also going to be doing, and I meant to get to this last month and didn't get to it, I'm finally, hopefully, going to be producing some lessons in this new online platform called Curious, which allows professors to not only upload videos, but include little mini quizzes and resources and all sorts of things like that to create a much more enhanced educational experience for students. People have been saying about my videos that I'm providing an online education for free, and whenever I see that, I think to myself, well, I'm not really providing an online education per se. I'm providing elements of an online education. I'm providing these lectures, and I go up to the board and I talk about things, and sometimes I link to useful resources. And I have a lot of stuff available online if people are interested in that sort of thing, handouts, articles that I've written. But there's more to education than simply having the text and having lecture videos to watch. There needs to be a bit more interactivity, the idea of having quizzes where a student can assess how well they understand the material, writing prompts, reflection questions to think about, handouts that they can use to make sense of things, links to other resources that they might find useful, like encyclopedia entries that are online, or projects or discussion groups. That makes it a much more powerful package, and that's what Curious is doing. And Curious does charge for some of the lessons, pretty minimal cost, which also makes it very attractive. And I have 3 lessons in there already about Jean-Paul Sartre. Those are sort of trial things. We want to see whether this sort of thing could work. I'm going to be uploading lessons this month, hopefully. This may be a little ambitious, but hopefully on Plato's Apology, Credo, and Euthyphro. So we're going to give that a shot. There's another educational platform that I'm pretty involved with called Learnist, where I create courses that give you links to the online texts, online versions of the text, some of my videos, handouts that I've developed, links to useful encyclopedia entries or things like that. And I've got about 12 courses in Learnist right now, ranging from Cicero to Plato to Aristotle to Kant and Bentham. And I'm going to be, my goal is to actually add 3 courses to Learnist per month. I want to be using these educational platforms to make it possible for people who either can't go to college because of the economy or, what's going on with their lives, or who are in college and are not getting that much out of it, or who want to, brush up on things. They have to take so many courses and they're not able to go back to do philosophy courses. I want to develop these resources within these online platforms to make that possible. And this is all sort of trial and error stuff. It uses my YouTube channel, but it uses a lot of other resources as well, like my academia.edu profile, where I upload handouts and other documents. Anyway, Learnist, curious, that's what I'm going to be working with this month. I might start looking at a few other platforms as well, but I'm trying to take it slow because I have a tendency to bite off more than I can chew at times. What else? Oh, videos. What am I going to be doing this month with videos? Well, I'm still teaching the intro course, so what we've got coming up this month is really interesting stuff. I just uploaded a video on Abelard and Eloise's letters, which reveal this amazing story of love, passion, revenge, taking vows that paradoxically bind them to this terrible fate. Anyway, if you haven't seen it, take a look at that video and read those letters. They're very, very interesting things. So I uploaded that. The next week and a half, we're going to be looking at Thomas Aquinas on love. So we're looking at some parts of the Summa Theologica, discussing divine love, discussing love as a passion or human emotion, and then discussing the virtue of charity and how it plays out. After that, we're going to be looking at the correspondence between René Descartes and Princess Elizabeth, brilliant, contemporary of Descartes, who actually prompted him to write one of his books. And we're going to read that book afterwards, The Passions of the Soul. If we have the time, we're going to try to get to bits of Kierkegaard's works of love. I'm not sure if we'll actually get to that. I will be doing some additional core concept videos, most likely. I have some on Kant that I shot. I've got some more to shoot on Mill. We've got some Aristotle ones, specifically on new, discussions of the virtues, like we're going to look at the virtue of courage and the virtue of good humor and things like that in my class. I'm not quite sure how much we'll actually get done with those core concepts. I don't want to promise too much, but I will be shooting quite a few. There's a few Kant ones to do. There's some Mill. There's some Aristotle. I might even shoot, if I have the time and the energy, some core concept videos that are not on my current class stuff, but on things like Heidegger's concept of truth. I'm going to be shooting some videos in the existentialism sequence. Now that I've got the ball rolling on Chef's stuff again, I want to keep plowing away at his stuff. I've got one more video to shoot on All Things Are Possible. And then I'm thinking the next work that I'm going to tackle is probably his Dostoevsky and Nietzsche, Philosophy of Tragedy. In addition to shooting some videos on Shestov this month in the existentialism sequence, I want to shoot some more Heidegger videos. And I'm going to be shooting things not out of Being and Time, or the Nietzsche lectures, which I will get to eventually in the existentialism sequence, but instead some more of the ones that are in the basic writing. So his response to Sartre in the piece on humanism, the question concerning technology, those are definitely going to be on the list. That might be enough for this month, because those might take more than an hour each to discuss. But there's a lot of things I've got sort of in the pipes when it comes to the existentialism sequence. I guess the last thing to say about that is, if you are interested specifically in the existentialist stuff, you probably want to follow my blog, Sadler's Existentialist Updates, because when I have new stuff available, or when I come across some cool sites, discussions about existentialism, I talk about it there. But if you don't want to do that, you've got my main blog, or Access de Noetique, that you can follow and wade through. I've been writing on that for about 3 or 4 years now. There's a lot of entries all over the map and what they discuss. And I guess that wraps it up. So, lot going on this month. I suppose I should wish you all a happy Thanksgiving in advance. Those of you who are here in the States, I believe there's some other Thanksgivings in other places, although I'm not really that up on that. And stay tuned. I should have about 20 or 25 new videos coming the rest of this month. And yeah, that's a good place to leave off.